Ladies and gentlemen, this morning I want to remind you of something sacred, something powerful, something you may have forgotten in the noise of life. There is a strength inside you that was woven into your being long before the world tried to convince you that you are small. There is a power planted in your spirit, a power that does not come from circumstance, applause, approval, or position. It is a God-given force, waiting not to be discovered, but to be recognized, and once recognized, to be activated. You are not empty. You are not weak. You are not waiting for something outside to complete you. You are carrying a fire within you, a fire that has survived storms, disappointments, betrayals, and long nights. And today, I invite you to stand tall, breathe deep, and reclaim what has been yours from the beginning. That power is already living inside you. Let us wake it up. Let us honor it. Let us use it. Recognize the God-given strength already planted within you. This invitation is not simply a call to think positively or to recite statements that make you feel momentarily empowered. It is much deeper than that. It is a reminder to look inward with honesty, reverence, and courage, and to acknowledge that there is something extraordinary inside you that did not arrive by accident. From the moment you took your first breath, you carried within you a spark of divine design, a strength that is woven into your soul. This strength is not dependent on your upbringing, your failures, your victories, or the circumstances that have shaped your life. It is independent of any external validation, despite what the world might have convinced you of. You were created with purpose, and with that purpose came the strength required to fulfill it. The tragedy is not that people lack power. The tragedy is that they often fail to recognize the power they already possess. Most people spend their lives searching outward, searching for approval, searching for confidence, searching for a feeling of worthiness, as if these things come from the outside. They wait for someone to affirm their value, someone to point to their potential, someone to remind them of their capacity. But real strength is not something that another person hands you. It is something that already lives within you, quietly beating beneath layers of doubt, fear, insecurity, and past wounds. When life becomes chaotic, when responsibilities pile up, when heartbreaks leave you feeling empty, you may forget that this strength exists. You may mistake struggle for weakness or challenges for incapability, but the presence of struggle does not erase the presence of strength. The truth is that your strength is often revealed through struggle, not in the absence of it. To recognize this God-given strength, you must be willing to pause. The noise of life can drown out the whisper of your inner power. Society tells you to move fast, to outperform, to prove something, to compete constantly, and in that rush, people forget to hear their own spirit. Recognition requires stillness. It requires a moment where you look inward instead of outward. When you sit with yourself long enough, quietly enough, truth begins to rise. You start to recall the obstacles you have already overcome, the valleys you have already walked through, the nights you thought you would not survive but did. You recognize that the fact you are still standing, still breathing, still striving is evidence of strength. Strength is not always dramatic. It is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply the ability to keep going when everything in you wants to stop. The world may have convinced you that strength must look like power, success, confidence, authority, or perfection. But strength can also look like resilience, persistence, gentleness, endurance, forgiveness, humility, or hope. Strength can be the courage to speak up, or the wisdom to stay silent. It can be the ability to let go or the decision to hold on. It can be the bravery to begin or the patience to wait. You must expand your definition of strength to recognize all the ways it lives within you. Because strength isn't one-dimensional. It is a living, breathing force that shifts according to what your life demands. Recognizing this power often requires unlearning the beliefs you have inherited. Maybe you were told that you are not enough, that your dreams are unrealistic, that your voice doesn't matter, or that you must rely on others for direction and approval. Maybe you were taught to dim your light so others would feel comfortable. Maybe you learned to hide your talents to avoid criticism. These beliefs become mental chains that keep you from seeing the truth of who you are. To recognize your God-given strength, you must challenge these beliefs. You must ask yourself, who told me I was not capable? Who told me I was not worthy? Who told me I must shrink to fit into someone else's expectations? You must question every thought that makes you feel small. Because those thoughts are not reflections of your true power, they are reflections of the wounds you have carried. There is a strength inside you that has been tested more than once. It has been tested by disappointment, by rejection, by loss, by failure, and sometimes by your own doubts. Yet that strength has not left you. It may have quieted, it may have been pushed down, it may have been buried under layers of discouragement, but it is still there. And you can recognize it by paying attention to the moments when you rose after falling, when you moved forward even while afraid, when you chose hope despite having reasons to give up. Those moments were not accidents. They were expressions of the strength within you. Strength is not something you gain someday. It is something you uncover. When God created you, He did not create you incomplete. He did not place you in this world without equipping you. Your gifts, your abilities, your instincts, your resilience, these are tools placed in you for your journey. But tools can only transform your life when you recognize them. Imagine walking through life with a treasure chest in your hands, but never opening it because someone convinced you it was empty. That is how many people move through the world. They carry treasure but believe it is nothing more than weight. Recognition turns weight into worth. When you see what you have been carrying, everything changes. Recognizing your strength also means acknowledging your identity at its deepest level. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are not defined by your failures. You are not defined by the opinions of others. You are not defined by the season you are currently in. You were defined by God long before you were defined by life. And God does not create weakness. He creates purpose, potential, and power. You are a vessel of something divine. You are designed to get up again, to rise again, to rebuild again, to believe again. And every time you do so, you honor the strength within you. Sometimes people do not recognize their strength because they compare themselves to others. They look at someone else's path, someone else's progress, someone else's gifts, and they assume their own are smaller. But comparison blinds you. It distracts you from the truth of your own design. Your strength was tailored for your journey, not someone else's. What others carry has nothing to do with what God placed in you. When you compare, you undervalue your own gifts. When you recognize, you appreciate the uniqueness of your strength and begin to understand that you have exactly what you need for the path ahead. There is also a spiritual dimension to recognition. You must understand that strength is not simply emotional or physical. It is spiritual. It is rooted in the truth that you are connected to something greater than yourself. When you draw from that source, fear loses its power over you. Doubt loses its authority. Obstacles stop appearing as barriers and start appearing as invitations for growth. Recognizing your strength means recognizing your source. The power within you is not something you created. It is something you were given. And when you acknowledge that, you stop living as though you are empty and start living as though you are equipped. Recognition also requires honesty. You must be willing to look at the parts of yourself you have ignored or avoided. Sometimes people fear recognizing their strength because strength comes with responsibility. When you know you are capable, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer avoid your calling. You can no longer pretend you are powerless. Recognizing your strength means stepping into the truth, even when the truth challenges your comfort. But it is better to live challenged by truth than comfortable in limitation. You may think you need a miracle to change your life, but sometimes the miracle is simply recognizing what is already inside you. You may believe you need more time, more courage, more clarity, more support, more resources, but often you already have everything you need to begin. Strength does not always show up as a loud force. Sometimes it is a quiet knowing, a steady resilience, a sacred confidence. It is that inner assurance that whispers, even in your weakest moment, there is more inside you than what you see right now. And as you begin to recognize that strength, you start treating yourself differently. You speak differently. You move differently. You make decisions from a place of power rather than fear. You no longer negotiate your worth. You no longer settle for less. You no longer allow people to diminish you. You rise into the fullness of who you were created to be. Recognition becomes transformation because the moment you see your power, you can no longer pretend you are powerless. The moment you acknowledge your strength, life begins to shift. You stop living small, you stop hiding, you stop doubting your ability to overcome, you stop believing that your future depends on things outside of you, you start understanding that your life expands in alignment with your inner strength. Silence the voices that convince you that you are not enough. This is not a small task, nor is it something accomplished in a single moment of inspiration. It is a lifelong practice, a continuous work of the soul, because those voices do not speak once and disappear. They return, they echo, they grow louder in moments of weakness, and they whisper in moments of strength. They creep into your thoughts through memories, through comparisons, through old wounds that never fully healed. These voices do not come from your divine identity. They come from fear, from past conditioning, from the opinions of others, and from the distorted stories you tell yourself when you are tired, overwhelmed, discouraged, or uncertain. To silence them, you must first understand where they come from and why they feel so convincing. Many of these voices were planted in you long before you had the wisdom to question them. Maybe they came from people who were broken themselves, people who spoke from their insecurities rather than their love. Maybe they came from a teacher who dismissed your potential, or a family member who underestimated your worth, or a friend who projected their limitations onto your dreams. Maybe they came from society's endless messages about what success should look like, who deserves it, and how you must act to earn approval. You absorbed these messages before you even had the language to challenge them, and now they linger in your mind like old shadows. To silence these voices, you must bring them into the light. You must recognize that not every thought you think is true, and not every voice inside you is your own. The mind is a powerful storyteller. It can create narratives that hold you captive for years. When a negative voice repeats itself enough times, it begins to sound like truth. It becomes familiar, and because it is familiar, you mistake it for reality. You start to believe things like, I'm not capable, I'm not worthy, I don't have what it takes, people like me don't succeed, my past defines me, I will always fail, or I don't deserve more. These beliefs shape your actions, your confidence, your decisions, and even your relationships. They make you shrink yourself, they make you settle for less, they make you walk away from opportunities, they make you hide your gifts, They make you doubt your voice. And the tragedy is that most of these beliefs were never true in the first place. Silencing these voices does not mean pretending they never existed. It means confronting them with truth. It means holding every negative thought up to the light and asking, whose voice is this? Who taught me to think this way? Does this belief align with who I truly am? Does it align with what God says about me? You must interrogate your fears the way a wise friend interrogates lies. When you begin to question the origin of these voices, you weaken their power. Lies only hold power when they go unchallenged. The moment you challenge them, the moment you name them, the moment you expose them, they begin to lose authority. There are moments when these voices come from your own disappointments. When you fail at something you hoped would succeed, the voice of doubt gets louder. When someone rejects you, the voice of unworthiness grows strong. When something falls apart, the voice that says you are not enough takes center stage. These moments are fragile because the voice of truth grows quiet in pain and the voice of fear becomes bold. This is why silencing those voices is a discipline. You do not silence them only when you feel strong. You silence them especially when you feel weak. You must learn to speak truth over yourself even when the truth feels distant. Truth sounds different from fear. Truth is steady, grounded, and clear. Fear is loud, chaotic, and urgent. Truth builds you. Fear diminishes you. Truth reminds you of your identity. Fear reminds you of your insecurities. When fear speaks, it tries to make you forget what you have already overcome. It tries to make you forget how resilient you are. It tries to make you forget the strength you displayed in past battles. It tries to make you believe that your struggle today is greater than your capacity. Truth, on the other hand, calls you back to yourself. It reminds you that you have survived before. It reminds you that you have grown before. It reminds you that you have risen from harder places. It reminds you that you are stronger than your fears, wiser than your doubts, and more capable than you realize. Many people allow these negative voices to guide their lives without even noticing. They make choices based on fear of failure rather than desire for growth. They avoid love because the voice says they are unlovable. They avoid purpose because the voice says they are unprepared. They avoid risk because the voice says they are not meant for more. These voices become the invisible rulers of their decisions. But imagine the life you would live if those voices were no longer in control. Imagine the boldness, the clarity, the purpose, the confidence you would embody if the only voice you followed was the one rooted in truth. To silence the voices that convince you that you are not enough, you must replace them with the voice that tells you who you actually are. This requires conscious effort. When a thought of inadequacy appears, you do not negotiate with it, you challenge it, you counter it, you speak affirming truth in its place. When the voice says you can't, you answer with, I have done hard things before. When the voice says you don't deserve good things, you answer with, I am worthy because I was created with purpose. When the voice says you will fail, you answer with, failure is part of growth, not a measure of my worth. Every time you respond with truth, you strengthen the foundation of your identity. There will be days when the negative voices feel relentless. They will remind you of your past mistakes. They will bring up old insecurities. They will distort your memories. They will exaggerate your weaknesses. They will minimize your strengths. That is when you must remember that silence is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of authority. You silence those voices not by fighting them loudly, but by grounding yourself deeply. You silence them by staying rooted in who you are. You silence them by refusing to let them dictate your choices. Sometimes these voices do not come from internal thoughts, but from external people. There are individuals who speak negativity into your life because they cannot imagine more for themselves. There are people who discourage you because your growth would force them to confront their own stagnation. There are people who criticize you because your dreams make them uncomfortable. Not everyone who speaks into your life deserves access to your mind. You must become selective with the voices you allow near your spirit. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It is essential for your destiny. When you surround yourself with people who believe in you, people who speak truth over you, people who remind you of your potential, the negative voices lose strength. Silencing the voice of self-doubt also requires healing. You cannot silence the voice that says you are unworthy if you are still carrying the wounds that created it. You cannot silence the voice that says you are incapable if you have not reconciled with the experiences that made you feel powerless. Healing is not simply moving past pain. It is understanding it, releasing it, and allowing it to transform you rather than define you. When healing begins, clarity increases. You start to see how much of your life has been shaped by old hurt. You start to see that many of your fears are not reflections of reality, but reflections of moments that broke you. And as you heal, you begin to separate your identity from your woundedness. The voice that once said, "I am not enough," becomes easier to silence because you realize it was born from places you are no longer living in. There is also spiritual work involved in silencing these voices. You must anchor yourself in something greater than your emotions. Emotions fluctuate. They rise and fall. They can mislead you. But when your identity is grounded in divine truth, you are no longer easily swayed by internal noise. You begin to measure your worth, not by how you feel on a bad day, not by one mistake, not by someone else's opinion, but by the unchanging truth that you are created with intention, equipped with purpose, and supported by grace. The voice of God does not sound like fear. It does not shame you. It does not belittle you. It calls you higher. It calls you deeper. It calls you into alignment with who you were always meant to be. Silencing these voices is not a one-time achievement. It is a practice. You will have days when the old thoughts return. You will have days when you slip into doubt. You will have days when fear tries to reclaim control. But every time you choose truth over fear, you weaken the influence of those old voices. Every time you speak life over yourself, you retrain your mind. Every time you stand firm in your identity, you reclaim territory that doubt once controlled. You are not a powerless observer of your thoughts. You are the gatekeeper of your mind. You choose which voices stay and which ones leave. You choose which thoughts you nurture and which ones you release. You choose whether you live according to fear or according to truth. And the more you practice choosing truth, the more natural it becomes. Silence is not empty. Silence is strength. When you silence the voices that convince you that you are not enough, you make room for clarity. You make room for purpose. You make room for confidence. You make room for your true voice to emerge. And that voice, the one rooted in truth, identity, and divine connection, has the power to reshape your entire life. It directs you toward your calling. It guides your decisions. It sustains you in moments of uncertainty. It reminds you that you are capable, worthy, resilient, and destined for more. Your life begins to shift when you stop listening to the voices that diminish you and start listening to the one that affirms who you truly are. In that space of quiet authority, in that sacred silence where truth outweighs fear, you begin to rise into the fullness of your being, guided not by insecurity, but by the deeper strength that has always lived within you. Activate your inner power through faith, discipline, and intentional choices. Activation is the moment when recognition becomes action. It is when you stop simply knowing that there is power inside you and begin using it. Many people are aware of their potential, aware of their dreams, aware of their purpose, but awareness alone does not create transformation. You can know that you are powerful, yet live as though you are powerless. You can know that you are gifted, yet still behave as though you are ordinary. Activation is the bridge between belief and manifestation. It is the point where potential becomes progress, where calling becomes movement, where purpose becomes lived reality. This activation requires faith, because faith is the engine that drives inner power forward. Faith is believing in what you cannot yet see but can deeply sense. Faith is moving before the path is clear, trusting that clarity will come as you step. Faith is refusing to wait for certainty and choosing to follow conviction instead. When you activate your power through faith, you stop living by what circumstances tell you and start living by what your spirit knows. Circumstances shift constantly, but faith remains steady. Faith allows you to walk into doors you have never entered, take risks you have never taken, and pursue goals others may not understand. Faith forces you to stretch. It leads you into terrains where comfort cannot follow. It teaches you to trust your inner voice, the one that whispers possibilities even when fear shouts limitations. Faith does not guarantee ease. It guarantees growth. When you walk in faith, you activate a confidence that does not depend on evidence. You begin to see yourself as capable, chosen, and equipped. You begin to treat challenges as opportunities. You begin to approach life with a posture of expectation rather than hesitation. Discipline is the structure that holds your power in place. Without discipline, your power leaks. Without discipline, your dreams drift. Without discipline, your motivation fades. Discipline is not punishment, it is alignment. It is choosing daily habits that reflect the future you desire instead of the comfort you feel in the present. Discipline means showing up even when inspiration is missing. It means practicing consistency even when results are slow. It means honoring your commitments to yourself even when no one is watching. Discipline is built in the small decisions, waking up when you want to stay asleep, focusing when distraction calls your name, practicing when progress feels invisible, staying committed when excitement wanes. These small choices form the backbone of activation. You cannot activate your inner power if you are loyal to your excuses. You cannot activate your inner power if you betray your own intentions. You cannot activate your inner power if you allow resistance to speak louder than responsibility. Discipline trains your mind to stay focused, your emotions to stay stable, and your actions to stay aligned. Intentional choices create direction. Without intention, you drift. Without intention, you react instead of lead. Without intention, you settle instead of rise. Activating your inner power requires you to make choices that support your strength. These choices may require letting go of people who drain you, environments that stunt you, habits that weaken you, and thoughts that sabotage you. Intention demands honesty. What is helping me grow? What is holding me back? What must I release? What must I embrace? Intentionality turns your power into progress. You begin to choose what you expose yourself to, what you believe about yourself, how you treat your time, and how you protect your energy. You begin to create boundaries that preserve your peace instead of letting others pull you into chaos. You begin to invest in learning, practice, reflection, and improvement. Intentional choices shift you from surviving to evolving. Activation requires courage because using your power often means stepping into unfamiliar territory. It means taking risks that others may avoid. It means facing fears that once controlled you. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear dictate your direction. Every courageous choice strengthens your inner power. Each time you confront what once intimidated you, you expand your capacity. Courage opens doors that stagnation keeps closed. It also requires identity alignment. You must act in harmony with who you truly are, not with the version of yourself shaped by doubt or insecurity. When you activate your power, you stop shrinking around people who feel uncomfortable with your growth. You stop apologizing for your gifts. You stop pretending to be less than you are. You begin embracing your full identity. You begin walking in the confidence of someone who knows they are built for more. Activation is also a spiritual commitment. It means trusting that God placed this strength inside you for a reason. It means cooperating with divine timing rather than resisting it. It means recognizing that your power is not random. It is purposeful. You were designed to create impact, to bring light, to rise through adversity, to walk boldly in your calling. Activation means saying yes to what God has placed inside you and refusing to bury your talents out of fear or doubt. Activation requires resilience. Even when you act in faith, use discipline, and make intentional choices, challenges will still appear, but your response determines your trajectory. When setbacks come, you adapt. When obstacles appear, you strategize. When discouragement rises, you remind yourself why you started. Resilience keeps your power active even when pressure increases. It reminds you that growth comes through endurance. You activate your power through self-belief, not the shallow kind of belief that wavers when life becomes difficult, but the deep conviction that you are worthy of transformation. You believe in your ability to change your life, to develop your gifts, to build new habits, to rise from old wounds. You give yourself permission to succeed. You give yourself permission to dream. You give yourself permission to evolve. Activation requires focus. Many people never activate their inner power because they are stretched thin by distractions. They spread their attention across too many directions, too many voices, too many commitments. Focus gathers your energy. Focus amplifies your progress. Focus strengthens your direction. When you focus, you stop wasting time on what does not matter. You stop giving energy to things that do not grow you. You stop allowing distractions to delay your purpose. Activation requires vision. You must see something ahead of you worth striving for. Vision motivates discipline, fuels faith, and clarifies intention. When you can see your future clearly enough in your mind, you begin moving toward it with purpose. Vision allows you to endure difficulty because you understand what you are working for. Vision gives you a direction your inner power can lock onto. Without vision, your power remains dormant. With vision, your power becomes unstoppable. Activation requires humility. Humility is not weakness, it is openness. It is the willingness to learn, to grow, to be corrected, to seek wisdom, to admit mistakes, to remain teachable. Humility strengthens power because it keeps you grounded. It keeps your spirit receptive. It allows inspiration to reach you, guidance to shape you, and growth to continue without ego blocking the way. Activation requires responsibility. You take ownership of your choices, your behaviors, your growth, and your life. You stop waiting for someone else to push you. You stop blaming circumstances for your stagnation. You stop expecting others to do the inner work for you. You recognize that your power is your responsibility. Activation requires consistency. Anyone can start. Few continue. Fewer finish. Consistency is what transforms effort into mastery. Consistency is what turns inspiration into transformation. Consistency keeps your inner power awake and active. Activation also requires honesty with yourself. You must acknowledge your patterns, confront your excuses, face your fears, and tell yourself the truth about what needs to change. Honesty opens the door to renewal. Without honesty, you remain stuck in cycles you cannot transform because you refuse to admit they exist. You activate your power through gratitude. Gratitude shifts your perspective from what is missing to what is possible. It strengthens your emotional resilience. It softens your spirit and widens your capacity for joy. Gratitude opens your heart to abundance. Activation is a personal transformation that reflects in your decisions, actions, habits, and lifestyle. It is the alignment of your spirit, your discipline, your intention, and your faith. It is when you step into your identity with confidence and begin living your life from a place of strength instead of fear. Walk boldly in the authority God has already assigned to your life. Boldness is not arrogance. It is not ego. It is not pride. Boldness is the expression of someone who knows they are walking in divine assignment. It is the posture of someone who understands that their authority comes from God, not from the world, and therefore cannot be taken by the world. To walk boldly is to live with the dignity, confidence, and courage of someone who understands that they are not operating on human permission, but on heavenly purpose. When you walk boldly, you stop apologizing for being who you were created to be. You stop dimming your light. You stop doubting your calling. You move with intention. You speak with clarity. And you stand with conviction, not because you are perfect, but because you are positioned. The authority that God assigns is not earned. It is inherited. It was placed on your life long before you understood it. It does not depend on your feelings, your mood, or your circumstances. Authority is spiritual. It is rooted in identity. It flows from understanding who you are and whose you are. Many people live below their authority because they measure their worthiness by their past mistakes, their current struggles, or their perceived shortcomings. But your authority does not come from your history. It comes from your Creator. God does not revoke His call because you falter. He does not reconsider His purpose because you stumble. Authority remains even when confidence wavers. To walk boldly in your authority, you must first accept it. Some people struggle not because they lack purpose, but because they refuse to accept that they are worthy of the purpose assigned to them. They question themselves at every step. They wait for someone else to confirm what God has already spoken. They diminish themselves so others do not feel threatened. They hide their gifts because visibility makes them uncomfortable. They shrink because faith requires expansion, and expansion feels unfamiliar. But authority does not shrink to accommodate comfort. Authority expands as you expand. It grows as you grow. It activates when you accept it. Walking boldly requires you to release the need for approval. Approval is a prison for the spirit. When you live for the validation of others, you surrender your authority to their opinions. You allow their preferences to dictate your decisions. You let their fears define your limits. But authority cannot flourish where approval is the goal. People may misunderstand you. They may question you. They may doubt you. They may resist the confidence you carry. But their discomfort is not your concern. You are not responsible for shrinking your calling to fit someone else's comfort zone. You are responsible for honoring the purpose God placed on your life. Boldness also requires clarity. When you know what you are called to do, you stop being distracted by what others are doing. You stop comparing your journey. You stop competing for validation. You stop chasing opportunities that do not align with your assignment. Clarity becomes a shield, protecting your energy from anything that does not align with your purpose. When you know your lane, you stop drifting. When you know your call, you stop wandering. When you know your authority, you stop negotiating your worth. To walk boldly, you must embrace responsibility. Authority is not just privilege, it is accountability. It requires you to show up fully, not partially. It requires integrity, discipline, and consistency. You cannot claim authority but live in avoidance. You cannot walk in purpose but operate in fear. You cannot speak with power but act with hesitation. Authority demands alignment between your words, your actions, and your beliefs. It requires you to live in truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. Walking boldly also means walking through opposition. You will face resistance when you step into your authority, not because you are wrong, but because your boldness threatens the insecurities of those who have not yet stepped into theirs. People may project their doubts onto you. They may question your confidence. They may misinterpret your courage. But opposition is evidence of movement, and movement is evidence of authority. If you face no resistance, you are likely not walking boldly enough. To walk boldly, you must let go of fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy. Fear is the voice that tells you to stay small. Fear is the voice that tells you authority belongs to others but not to you. Fear is the voice that convinces you that you are not ready. But fear is a liar. Fear is an illusion created by the mind, not a truth spoken by God. God does not speak in the language of fear. He speaks in the language of purpose, strength, and destiny. When you walk boldly, you silence fear by stepping forward anyway. Walking boldly also requires spiritual grounding. Authority is sustained by connection to God, connection to purpose, connection to inner truth. You must nurture your spiritual life if you want your authority to remain strong. Prayer strengthens your direction. Reflection strengthens your wisdom. Gratitude strengthens your spirit. Obedience strengthens your alignment. When you are spiritually grounded, you move with a confidence that cannot be shaken by circumstance. You carry a peace that does not depend on external conditions. You walk with a presence that reflects divine backing. Your authority will call you into rooms you once felt unqualified to enter. It will open doors you once thought were too big for you. It will place you in positions where you must rise to meet the calling. But authority does not place you where you cannot grow. If God leads you somewhere, He equips you for it. Boldness is trusting that if you are meant to be there, you belong there. It is trusting that you are prepared, even if you feel nervous. It is trusting that you are capable, even if you have never done it before. Boldness is believing what God says about you more than you believe what fear says about you. Walking boldly also means celebrating your growth. You cannot walk in authority while diminishing your progress. You must acknowledge how far you've come. You must honor your journey. You must appreciate the strength it took to reach this point. Celebration is not arrogance. It is gratitude. It is recognition that you did not get here by accident. It is acknowledgement that God has been guiding you, strengthening you, shaping you. When you celebrate your growth, you affirm your authority. To walk boldly, you must also speak boldly. Your words carry power. The language you use about yourself shapes your identity. You cannot walk in authority while speaking in doubt. You cannot claim strength while speaking weakness. You cannot claim destiny while speaking defeat. Your words must align with your calling. Speak with conviction. Speak with faith. Speak with certainty. Speak with gratitude. Speak as someone who knows who they are. Boldness requires presence. You cannot walk boldly if you are half present, half committed, or half believing. You must show up fully in every space God leads you into. Show up with intention. Show up with preparation. Show up with humility and confidence. Presence is power. When you enter a room with clarity, purpose, and authenticity, your authority becomes undeniable. Walking boldly also requires boundaries. Authority cannot thrive where boundaries do not exist. You must protect your energy, your time, your peace, your vision. You must say no to what does not align with your purpose. You must distance yourself from relationships that weaken your spirit. You must remove yourself from environments that diminish your confidence. Boundaries are not limitations, they are protection. They preserve the authority you carry. Walking boldly means trusting that you are guided. You may not see the entire path, but you step anyway. You may not understand every detail, but you trust anyway. You may not know how everything will unfold, but you continue anyway. Trust is a form of boldness. It is faith in motion. It is surrender with confidence. It is movement fueled by divine assurance. To walk boldly, you must embrace the identity God assigned to you, not the identity shaped by your past, not the identity shaped by society, not the identity shaped by comparison, but the identity shaped by divine intention. You were not created to live unnoticed, unheard, or unfulfilled. You were created with purpose, with assignment, with authority. When you accept that identity, your steps become stronger, your voice becomes clearer, and your presence becomes undeniable. Walking boldly is not a moment, it is a lifestyle. It is a continuous choice. It is the daily decision to rise, to step forward, to honor your calling, to trust your strength, to embrace your purpose, to walk in alignment with the authority God has placed upon your life.